Renowned teacher of meditation and yoga in the Washington area, and he spent his whole life in the practice and study of meditation and yoga. His personal story is fascinating. He spent 24 years at the Kripalu Center as a student and a teacher, and then president, and the Kripalu Center is the largest, most well-known retreat, health, and holistic living center in North America. He met Tara Brach, who you may know. She's also known in our area, and married and moved from the Kripalu Center down to Washington. And here he's a guiding teacher at the Institute for Guided Meditation. He helped found the Meditation Institute, right, for training meditation teachers. So with that, I'd like to say he's going to talk to us today about forgiveness, the art and the science and the power of forgiveness as part of our broader effort to figure out how we can have civil discourse in the current climate. So Jonathan, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much. Get down my room.
Jonathan will do a brief presentation and then we will do an exercise.
Yes.
Right?
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. I always like to introduce myself as a miracle of yoga and meditation. I was 5'4" when I started. Here I am a little over 6'5", so you might want to measure yourself at the end of this session, see if there are any changes. I actually experienced meditation for the first time when I was 15, and there was something about it that I knew I'd be doing this for the rest of my life, and I really have been. So I wanted to share a little bit with you today about this art and science of forgiveness. You know, how does it work? It's one of the most challenging practices there is, but as all great traditions teach, everything points toward the internal freedom you have when you can forgive, and yet there are all kinds of pitfalls. So I wanted to share a little bit of an experience that I had encountering this. I was president of Kripalu Center, which is this huge, sprawling, very complicated, organic, messy organization. And when I realized I wanted to be the guy coming to teach, not the guy worried about the fuel bill being paid, I stepped down. But in any stepping down from running an organization, there's always some challenges. And I knew that the best place for me to go would be to go to a meditation retreat. So I went to a 30-day silent retreat out at a place called Spirit Rock in California. And in silence for 30 days, except for short interviews with a teacher, and practicing different forms of meditation. But every day, we would practice what are called the heart practices. And this is an actual training you take on to train yourself to increase your capacity for kindness and joy and compassion and equanimity. So every day for an hour, we would do a very specific practice that would direct our attention toward opening the heart. And as the saying goes, where the attention goes, the energy flows. So whatever you pay attention to, you'll see more. So the first week, every hour, we would spend our time focusing on kindness towards self, which can be very challenging, of course, because we're trained to be self-critical. So that was a bit of a challenge, but the next week was a little bit easier because there you spend an hour reflecting on the benefactor, everyone who's been kind to you, all the unexpected generosity you've experienced in your life. And so you think of those people, and there are certain phrases that you can work that can be very, very helpful. May you feel happy as I wish to feel happy. May you know peace as I wish to know peace. May you feel free from suffering as I wish to feel free from suffering. And you pay attention to what that feels like inside. That's the really important part of the practice. It's not a mental practice, it's really an embodied practice. So when you think about someone who is kind to you and you really reflect on them, you may notice a feeling start to build inside. So we established this as a practice. In the third week, then you were to choose what's called a neutral person. And that is someone that you don't feel any particular antipathy toward, nor are you particularly attracted to any particular person. But that person becomes your object for the whole week. And again, you just wish them well. You wish them peace and happiness. So I chose the retreat manager. of our month-long who seemed like a fine person but completely unremarkable, to be honest. And so every afternoon for an hour, may you feel happy, may you feel peace, may you feel free from suffering, may you feel strong and healthy. I just kept sort of streaming this well-wishing toward her. About the third day, I'm sitting, and the retreat manager walks into the retreat hall, and suddenly my heart surges. It's like, my beloved has arrived. And I realized I'm falling in love with the retreat manager. But again, where the attention goes, the energy flows. What you focus on gets bigger. And that was really quite a wonderful experience. And I had to dial it back a little bit because I realized I don't want to get distracted here in my practices. But kind of what happens is when you fall in love with someone, you tend to focus on what you like and you minimize what you don't like. And whenever there's a shift in a relationship and you start pulling away, it's the opposite. You start minimizing what you do like, you focus on what you don't like, and that's part of how we consciously or unconsciously begin to separate from each other. The final week, the focus was on what's called the difficult person, or the enemy. And here you take someone who has been the object of some form of hurt or betrayal, and there you begin to turn your attention toward wishing them well. And you begin to focus on what it means to really acknowledge the hurt and to explore what it means to let that go. Very, very challenging. So during that week, I was struggling with this because there was someone who I really felt betrayed. And truly, I don't think there's anyone in this room who hasn't felt at some point betrayed by someone or extremely disappointed by someone. So you have these 15-minute interviews with a teacher during these month-longs. And my interviews were with Jack Kornfield, who's the founder of Spirit Rock. So I sat down and I said, here's where I am with the forgiveness practice. I've come to realize I can completely forgive this guy as long as I'm assured that he burns in hell for eternity. That was a shift. I was feeling good about myself. And then something happened. And again, something very interesting happened in this practice. And that is, I began to get access to what we call a role reversal. I was able to begin to sense what his experience was. In this particular situation, as I was kind of departing the organization, he told me one thing, but then behind my back went to the board and told other things, and it was just a horrible thing. But I began to see how frightened he was. He was terrified of losing his job. He completely threw me under the bus. But I began to see and I began to feel empathy for him because I began to realize the suffering and the stress that he was encountering. There's an analogy which my wife uses a lot, but I find it very, very helpful because it's really key to really unlocking the places where you find it difficult or hard to forgive. And the analogy is you're walking in a beautiful park, lots of leaves, just like today, and you see a little puppy under a tree. And you go over to pet this cute little puppy, and you bend over, and suddenly it lunges at you and it tries to bite you. Well, you jump back. Your relationship to that puppy has just changed dramatically. And then you realize that the puppy's leg is caught in a trap. Suddenly your relationship has changed again. And then you understand what caused the puppy lunging for you. That's a real key when we explore what it means to forgive. To really reflect, how is that other person's leg caught in a trap? How is my leg caught in a trap that has led to me being unskillful in some way? So I can talk about this stuff all day long, but the real valuable experience is to really try it on for yourself. So there are a few things that are helpful in understanding a little bit about how forgiveness works. And one of the things I love practicing through this lens of kind of Buddhist psychology is that this stuff isn't pessimistic, it's not optimistic, it's realistic. So there's a bit of a formula that can be very, very helpful in applying, looking at what it means to really forgive and to reclaim whatever is there. So one element here that's really important is that the practice of forgiveness really needs to be an embodied practice. Not so much of an intellectual practice, but to really sense, well, what do you feel on the inside? As many massage therapists use this as their byline, your issues are in your tissues. You know, all of your hurts, all of your painful memories, all of your story, they live on the inside, as well as all your thoughts and memories of happiness and bliss. If you think about them, you'll notice that there's a resonance in the body. So keeping that awareness of the body is tremendously helpful. The other thing that's very important to recognize when you begin to explore forgiveness is part of the essence of what got in the way of forgiving is some form of very, very deep hurt, some form of betrayal. And it's very important to ask yourself if it really feels okay to explore this. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. It just feels like it's too much. You get flooded when you think about this, or it's just too hard. You know, we talk a lot about trauma in our culture right now. And one definition of trauma I find helpful is that trauma is really two things. It's fear and helplessness. When you combine fear and helplessness, your body goes into a very powerful form of self-preservation. You'll either go into some form of anger, aversion, judgment, blame, or you'll go into some form of disassociation, or you'll find yourself freezing up inside. So it can be very helpful to ask yourself when you begin to consciously address forgiving someone, does it feel safe? Does it feel okay? Do I have the resources? It might be that under different conditions, it might be appropriate. It might be that you might need some help. So that's a very important thing to recognize. The second thing is to recognize that forgiveness in no way means that you approve of the other person and their behavior. It is absolutely possible to forgive someone and never speak to them again. It's possible to forgive someone and never, ever allow that activity to be repeated, ever. That is really, really critical. And you may find that as you explore this unraveling, that your capacity to feel empathy for another may actually allow you to be more effective when you're interacting with that person. Instead of reacting, you might have a little more of a capacity to respond to them. So there are two formulas for this practice of meditation. And I'd like to just touch on it, on the classical formula. And again, this is through this lens of Buddhist philosophy or Buddhist psychology. Then there's a more kind of updated contemporary one that's a little more juicy. I'm going to save that one and spring that one on you later. But as I was exploring this practice and going through the classical phrases, what this particular approach says is, well, first you have to ask forgiveness for yourself. And I thought, wait a minute, he's the guy who betrayed me. Why would I even begin to contemplate asking forgiveness for myself? Here's the phrase, please forgive me. Please forgive me for any ways I may have harmed you, consciously or unconsciously. That's a really critical point in there, consciously or unconsciously. Sometimes we consciously want to hurt someone, or we want to show our disapproval, or we want to tighten the screw, or whatever it may be. A lot of times it's not conscious. We're acting out of some form of ignorance. Please forgive me for any way I may have harmed you, consciously or unconsciously, through my thoughts, my speech, or my actions. Now, reflecting on that, was I harmful through my thoughts? Absolutely. All of my revenge fantasies that I was able to watch on that meditation retreat, absolutely, I was doing harm with my thoughts. Did I do harm through my speech? Absolutely. I talked to anyone who would listen about this, basically. And through my actions, not quite so much, but no question about it. I was engaging into doing harm through my thoughts and through my speech. So reflecting on those phrases and contemplating on those phrases meant I really had to take responsibility for my side before I could begin to explore forgiving the other. And then you turn your attention to the other. Please, I forgive you. I forgive you for any way you may have harmed me, consciously or unconsciously, through your thoughts, your speech, or your actions. Now, there's a very interesting thing here about forgiveness if you take this on as a spiritual practice. The first thing to keep in mind is that it is not a quick fix. There have been all kinds of studies exploring this, that what happens usually over time is if you continue to explore forgiveness, it's as if the charge begins to soften a little bit. And you sort of realize, oh, I'm a little bit less activated over time. Another important thing to recognize is that if you focus on forgiveness, you're going to notice everything that isn't forgiveness. Just like when you practice meditation, I'm going to be present. Well, guess what? You're going to notice every way you're not present. And that's what the practice is designed to do, is to show you all the ways that you resist the moment, all the different ways, all the patterns of where your mind goes. When you focus on the compassion practices, they will reveal to you all the ways that you're petty and mean and self-centered. So the forgiveness practice can actually be a cathartic practice. If you begin to really explore what it means to forgive another person, there's a vulnerability that can arise. And that requires really two things. It requires first seeing it clearly, seeing the vulnerability, and then compassion. Finding a way to hold that sense of hurt or betrayal in some form of loving kindness, some form of empathy or compassion. So the practice is one that requires a quality of sincerity. And it also requires really staying present to what arises. It's a powerful transformational practice. So what I'd like to suggest is that we actually try this on as a practice. And I also think it'll be really, really helpful. The best thing I know of in engaging in these practices is to take a few minutes after to describe what you noticed and to hear from others who are also practicing. That will inform you more than anything that I talk about here. So what I'd like to suggest, and I'm aware our time is somewhat limited, that we go into groups of 3. So if you could turn your chair to find 2 other people, and we'll make a nice little circle of 3. I'll guide you through the practice, and then we'll debrief a little bit. Twos are fine also. Okay, 2s or 3s. So if you could bring yourself in nice and close. We have a group of 4. Could we split you into 2s? Just because for time, that would be great. So we'll go into 2s. Yeah. If you can hear the sound of my voice, raise your hand.
I can hear you.
If the sound of my voice is resonating in your consciousness, raise your hand. If you can hear the sound of my voice, raise your hand and slowly shift it back and forth. Worked in kindergarten, still works today. It's great. So bring yourself in nice and close where your knee to knee, your knees are almost bumping. So as you explore this topic of forgiveness, first I'll be inviting you to reflect on someone you might like to experiment with. And I also like to recommend you, on a scale of 1 to 10, select someone maybe a 5 or 6, not your lifelong arch nemesis, just to kind of give you a sense of how the practice works. And then we'll take a little time to sort of reflect on that person. I'll be guiding you through these two different forms of the forgiveness practice, and then we'll take a little time to debrief. So if you like, you can close your eyes. And you might like to now just slow down your breath a little bit. Just breathe in slowly to the count of 4 or 5. And then exhale slowly to the count of 4 or 5. And then again, breathing in slow to the count of 4 or 5. Exhale slowly to the count of 4 or 5. We're going to begin with a few minutes just to settle. Could you imagine your forehead smooth? Could you relax your tongue in a way that it fills your lower jaw? Is it possible to relax your belly just a little bit? And can you feel the palms and fingers and thumbs? And can you feel the soles of your feet? And you might just take a few moments now just to go through the files and just to sense, is there one person in particular that you might like to investigate through this practice of forgiveness? If you need a little more time, you can raise your right hand. Now, if you would, take a moment to visualize this person. Can you see them either as a still image or maybe like a little movie clip? You might explore any auditory information, just recalling maybe the tone of voice or any sounds that you associate with this person. And now shifting your attention to the kinesthetic. As you think about this person, what do you feel on the inside? Can you locate the felt sense of just thinking about this person? Taking some time to reflect on the phrases. And as you do so, just sensing what arises for you as you contemplate these phrases. First, reflecting on asking forgiveness for yourself. Please forgive me. Please forgive me for any way I may have harmed you, consciously or unconsciously, through my thoughts, speech, or actions. Reflecting on the following: I forgive you. I forgive you for any way you may have harmed me, consciously or unconsciously, through your thoughts, your speech, or actions. And just sensing in your own way the possibility of being forgiven